Okay. Hi, everybody. I think we're all here, or I say we're all here. I see everybody's already in the chat. I'm going to just talk to myself on camera since I don't have a co-host today. But let me say a quick hello to everybody who's here, and I can already see a bunch of my buddies are here, including Jeff, my co-writer. Hello. Hi, Emily and Susan and Elisa and NJ. And I know TW's here. TW and Reed. Hello, everybody. I'm thinking that's David. Hi, David. All right, you guys. Well, this is actually a pretty long presentation and it includes a demo. So I am going to go ahead and get started. Hi, Erin. I've got the chat pulled up on my second screen and I see the delay, you guys. I get why that's a little distracting. So I'm doubling up today. I've got the chat on my screen over there. When I see somebody with a question, I might just start and we can answer questions at the end. But let's get started because this is, like I said, this is actually a pretty long presentation. So here we go. Secrets to the perfect plot twist. All right, so we're talking about plot twists today, and we're not just talking about like kind of normal plot twists. Part of what I want to do is teach you how to write a plot twist that makes your reader like sit back and go like, wait, what? And then start flipping back through your book to see like all the clues that you really cleverly laid down for them. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by talking about these things called two-sided truths. So, what are they and what do they look like in a story? We're also going to analyze some really famous examples of this. And from it, I've chosen all stories that were also made into movies so that you can study the storytelling without necessarily like having to go back and read it if you're short on time. And let's face it, you guys, if you are anything like me and my husband and my family, since I've become a writer and I've learned about the craft of storytelling, we cannot watch movies or television shows without now everyone in my family, yelling out when there's a clue or, oh, this is what's going to happen next. So, movies are great if you haven't read the stories. All right. So we are actually going to kind of take a leaf out of the mystery writer's handbook because effective misdirection and building reader assumptions are like a beautiful way to work a plot twist into your story and make it work. So we're going to borrow from the mystery writer's handbook here. And we're going to talk kind of briefly about timing. So like, where are you going to reveal this beautifully crafted plot twist of yours? So we're also going to talk about narrators, and your narrator can play a really, really big role in the delivery of your twist. And last, we're going to talk about some common pitfalls because no one likes a cheater. Okay, you've got to play fair in all of this. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's playing fair and what's not. And then this is kind of huge because we're going to do a demo. Everybody's story is different. Okay, but at the end of this, you're going to know what to do, but like how you are going to go about logistically putting it all together is another question. And so I'm going to show you a way that I figured out how to do it that made sense to me, and maybe it will make sense to you. And if not, maybe it'll help sort of jumpstart your own process about how you can work all of this in to the planning of your novel. All right, so first things first, all right, to keep us grounded, I'm going to use a couple of examples that are probably kind of in our collective cultural consciousness anyway, either thanks to like pop culture or our high school English teachers. But spoiler alert, If you have any of the following on your TBR list or your to be watched list, since there are movie versions of these, you might want to consider like going ahead, and if you're watching live, drop off the call. I won't feel offended. Or if you're watching this after the fact, hit pause until you're ready. But here's my examples. These are the books I'm going to be using. To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a classic coming of age story. The psychological thriller Fight Club. I feel like this is your classic plot twist. A fantasy book. We're going to be doing Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And lastly, I really wanted something with sort of a romance element to it. So I've got Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. You can see I'm kind of trying to span the gamut here, genres, reading levels, classic to more current, but all done really well and to various degrees. So some of these are wild plot twists and some of these are very quiet plot twists, all right? But from the shocking to the subtle, every one of them makes you go back through all the clues in the story to see where the writer laid it all out. So consider yourself warned. I'm going to be spoiling the ending of all 4 of these stories. So let's start here with the two-sided truth, right? A twist does not come out of nowhere, right? We writers are smart and we're super tricksy, right? We love it. I mean, as a reader, we love it when the revelation in a story happens and then it like recasts everything that we thought we understood about the book that we were reading. So this is where that two-sided truth comes in. It's a total tongue twister, you guys. So these two-sided truths are something that has a surface meaning and a deeper meaning, right? They're a story element that has a surface meaning and a deeper meaning, right? Your reader believes one thing, the surface meaning, only to realize, often in some sort of like gut punch moment, that they were wrong all along. All right. You, the author, were playing fair the whole time because you left a trail of breadcrumbs for the reader to follow. And on second look, it might even feel like you occasionally left an entire slice of bread. They just didn't notice it. All right. So we're going to look at how to build those dual layers into your character's plot and world so that your twist feels both surprising and inevitable. Right? Those are 2 big requirements if you're going to pull this off. By the end of the session, you're going to have the concrete tools to create your own twist-worthy two-sided truth, whether you're writing mystery, fantasy, rom-com, thriller, or something delightfully weird in between. All right, so let's start with Fight Club. Right? Fight Club is a thriller action. I've heard it classified as a psychological thriller, which sort of hints at what is happening. All right, so you think that the narrator of the story is tagging along with Tyler Durden, right? Who is this like rebellious, charismatic leader who's like pulling him out of his dull corporate existence, right? So that's the surface truth that Chuck wants you to know as you read the story. Right. But the deeper truth is that the narrator actually is Tyler, right? So Tyler is a projection of everything that the narrator, who's never really named in the story, right, feels he lacks. So Tyler is like freedom and confidence and power. And when the twist hits, we realize they're the same person. And it sort of forces us to like reinterpret everything we've read through this new lens. And now suddenly the story is about like identity and madness and the danger of repressing parts of ourselves, right? So the two-sided truth is Tyler exists, but only in the narrator's mind. So now let's talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, all right? Southern Gothic coming of age novel, right? We spend most of the book fearing Boo Radley, right? So he's this reclusive neighbor. He's whispered about. He doesn't come out except at night, right? Everyone sort of judges him. He's even used as a ghost story to scare kids. But the deeper truth is Boo has been quietly protecting Scout, the main character, and Jem the entire time, right? Because when Bob Ewell attacks Scout and Jem, Boo is the one who saves them, right? He's been quietly watching over them, offering protection and connection in his own silent way. But the town had sort of cast him as this monster, right? The truth is, Boo is the story's quiet hero. Two-sided truth, right? Boo Radley is both feared and feared for. All right, let's look at Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. All right, it's a fantasy book. So you can also do this in fantasy, right? All through the book, Sirius Black is a character who's treated as this really dangerous escaped convict, right? He's believed to have betrayed Harry's parents, and now he's coming after Harry. But what's the truth? The truth is that Sirius is innocent, right? He was framed by Peter Pettigrew. He's actually trying to protect Harry. He's not trying to harm him, right? So the shift is huge. Sirius goes from a supposed villain to a tragic, like loyal father figure, right? The two-sided truth is Sirius is both fugitive and found family. Okay, so the last book that we're looking at, just to sort of lay the groundwork for you guys with all four of these stories. So we have Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. It's a contemporary YA. It's a rom-com. It's sort of like an identity mystery. All right. The story centers on Simon. He's a closeted teen who has fallen for an anonymous classmate. He's been emailing back and forth with this person, right? And it's somebody who goes by the alias of Blue. So throughout the novel, both Simon and the reader are playing detective, trying to figure out who Blue really is, right? So the surface truth leads us to suspect various classmates along the way. We suspect Ethan, we suspect Cal, Bram, even Nick. All right. So every interaction in this story is a clue, and Simon makes assumptions based on behaviors, glances, guesses, right? But the hidden truth, right? The hidden truth is that Blue has been Bram all along. He's the shy, like quiet classmate. All right. And the signs are there. They're just small and subtle and easily dismissed. And there's a reason why I sort of picked this book. It's going to kind of go hand in hand with one of our strategies later on. All right. However, even though this is not a really gut punch sort of twist, when the reveal comes, it's just very heartwarming and it's satisfying and it's like super emotionally resonant. All right. So the two-sided truth is Bram is the quiet friend, but he's also the secret love interest. All right. So quiet twist. I just sort of hinted at that. Right. In a story like Fight Club, you get this gut punch twist and you get why it works. Like this particular story, Simon, is really more of like a tug on the heartstrings twist, right? But why does it work well? It works well because it's built on emotional stakes. It's not just built on plot mechanics. So I want you to keep that in mind. This is super important for those of you writing these quieter stories, right? Fight Club is also built on an emotional stake, but so is this, and so is To Kill a Mockingbird, right? They're just playing with different emotions, and you have to figure out what emotion you're going to play with for your story that works to craft the tale that it is that you're trying to tell. All right. So the second reason that makes this quiet twist work is because the misdirection that Becky lays down in this story, it's fair, right? It's fair. It's grounded in character. It's not grounded in trickery. All right. We're going to talk about this later on. But it also works because the reveal deepens our understanding of both boys, right? And it brings us catharsis rather than shock. So kind of think about where your story lays on that spectrum, and you'll see you can use these same strategies different ways to deliver the ending that it is that you want to deliver for the reader. All right. So in all of these examples, the twist doesn't just shock us, it transforms what we thought we knew. That's the power of this two-sided truth. It holds the twist in plain sight, waiting for us to turn the story over and see what's underneath it. All right. So how do we do this, right? That's all well and good, Abby, but like, how do I do it? So let's digest this even further so that we can put it into practice in our own stories, right? So keep in mind, you're not just coming up with a twist, you're designing a layered experience that unfolds naturally for the reader, all right? So we're going to start with these two fundamental questions. The first one is, what do I want the reader to believe? And what's the truth underneath? All right, this is step one. The surface truth, remember, is what your protagonist and your audience believes to be true. It's the version of reality that seems consistent, comfortable, familiar, right? And then the hidden truth is the actual reality. Like, what is going on that flips our understanding once it's revealed? Now, remember the example in To Kill a Mockingbird. The surface truth is that Boo Radley is dangerous, but the hidden truth is that he's kind and protective. So it's that contrast that sort of gives this twist its power, okay? In Fight Club, the surface truth is that Tyler's a separate person, but the hidden truth is that he's a split off identity. So again, the reader believes one thing, but the truth changes everything in hindsight. So step one is really, what false belief will your reader and your character hold on to? And what's the real truth that will eventually be revealed? All right, step two, and this is where the trickery starts, is you're going to build your reader assumptions, right? Because readers make assumptions based on the information that you choose to show them or spotlight for them. All right. So your job is to gently lead them to a conclusion that seems obvious, but it's not. Okay. How? How are we doing this? Well, we're going to do it through character bias, right? If your narrator believes something strongly, then your reader probably will too. So Scout believes that Boo Radley is dangerous. So guess what? So does the reader, right? In Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, the reader is on the same emotional roller coaster as Simon. Each time Simon thinks he's uncovered Blue's identity, you become convinced that you have too. All right, the second thing that you're going to do, and all these are sort of related, you guys, but you can also build reader assumptions through reputation and gossip, right? So like Boo Radley, everyone in town believes he's creepy. So then we, as the readers, also believe it without even seeing it firsthand, right? Because we really only know his reputation. He comes out at night, right? Which is spooky and a bit sus to begin with. It makes him function more like a ghost, to be honest. And he really doesn't appear until the end of the book. And even then, he only speaks once, right? But you feel his presence throughout the entire story, right? And part of that is through the gossip. Like there's this rumor that he kills the neighbor's pets, right? So of course, all of this is feeding into the fact that he's dangerous. So the neighborhood believes it. There's rumor, there's gossip, and Scout, the main character, she believes it. So all of this really plays into your reader's assumptions, right? But you as the writer have to choose what to reveal and what to hold back. So you're going to frame your scenes selectively, right? You're not going to lie. You're just going to choose what to reveal and what to hold back. So in Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, Simon, and therefore the reader, they fixate on the wrong classmates because the clues are framed in ways that just feel convincing, right? But the truth is quietly sitting there in the background the whole time. All right, so assumptions are the rope you're going to hand your readers so that they can tuck on it themselves and unravel the twist. All right, so there's a kind of a third step to this, right? You're going to build your readers Misassumptions. Again, there's plenty of overlap here in my mind, even with step 2. I'm going to say this again, like you have to play fair. So let's talk about probably the one misassumption that everyone knows about when you're talking about mystery stories in particular, and that's red herrings. All right, so these are clues that point the reader in the wrong direction, but they still make sense in the world of the story, right? They are going to sort of foreshadow the truth because buried next to them are sort of these small, seemingly innocuous clues that only click in hindsight, right? Because you, as the writer, are really spotlighting the red herrings while you're just quietly burying the true clue next to it. So let's kind of break some of them down, right? And I think probably one of the best books for this, at least out of the ones that I chose, is the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, right? So we're led to believe that Sirius Black is this dangerous criminal, right, who's after Harry Potter. And we're led to believe that Sirius, comes to Hogwarts for Harry for all these nefarious reasons, right? But he's not there to hurt Harry, right? The one he wants to hurt is Peter Pettigrew, who betrayed Harry's parents and ultimately led to their death, right? But if you were reading Harry Potter or watching Harry Potter for the first time, the third movie, you'd be like, well, there's no Peter Pettigrew in the story. All right, so let's talk about the red herrings, right? So first, we have Sirius, the biggest red herring in the book, right? For the entire book, we believe that he's bad for all the reasons laid out in the previous slides. The characters believe it. There's rumor, there's gossip, right? And Rowling has framed all the scenes to lead us to believe that Sirius is guilty and truly is after Harry, right? He's imprisoned for killing 12 muggles, as well as for killing Peter Pettigrew, right? The public believes that he's a deranged murderer who betrayed the Potters and killed Pettigrew, right? So the wizarding public believes it as well, not just the main characters that we're seeing the lens of the story through, but the whole public wizarding world believes it, right? So in addition to everything I just laid out here, Azkaban is also known for making prisoners go insane, right? So we have all these clues here. So we've got this now insane escaped convict who is obsessed with Harry, right? So of course this part is true. It's just not true for the reasons we're led to believe. So it's really easy, though, for as a reader to let our mind train sort of run away down the wrong track, because this false belief that Rowling has set up totally makes sense in the context of the story, right? But now let's talk about Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew is actually the one responsible for the 12 muggle murders, right? And for faking his own death, as well as framing Sirius and betraying the Potters. So like, where are the clues that lead us to that ending of the story, right? Well, first of all, it's in this book that the students first learned from Professor McGonagall, who is a credible source, by the way, about these things called animagus, right? Professor McGonagall herself like transforms into a cat in front of the class, right? So this is built into the beginning of the story, and it's a school lesson, which really feels like it's just a bunch of magical world building, right? But it's totally foreshadowing, right? Because the spoiler is that Peter Pettigrew is actually an unregistered animagus named Scabbers, right? The rat is his animal form, which, by the way, is kind of brilliant because he is a rat in both the literal and figurative senses, right? So it sort of makes sense. But here's another clue. Scabbers is old, you guys. So early in the story, you see Ron's rat, Scabbers. He's Ron's pet. He's been Ron's pet since, I think, book 1, right? Harry has the owl Hedwig. Hermione has the cat Crookshanks. Neville has his toad Trevor. So the fact that Ron has this pet rat Scabbers is not weird, right? It's just easy for us to believe. But Ron's brothers mention that Scabbers has been in the family forever. You guys, rats don't live that long, right? again, this is a magical world. So we're willing to just chalk this up to like magic and world building. So that's like a little breadcrumb that readers are just going to gloss right over. Right? But then also we have Hermione's cat Crookshanks. So when Crookshanks starts to fixate on Scabbers, the reader thinks it just makes sense because cats eat rats, right? But as you start to uncover more about both of these characters, neither one of them is exactly what they seem. And Crookshanks' obsession starts to make more sense as the story goes on. Right? So in chapter 13, Scabbers just goes missing, right? Scabbers disappears, and Ron assumes that Crookshanks ate him, right? That's an easy assumption to make because the author has set it up that way. But in reality, Scabbers has fled because he senses danger. Sirius Black is getting close. Remember, Sirius Black and Peter used to be best friends in high school. Right? Peter has spent all these years hiding, but it would be really difficult to hide from Sirius, who knows his animagus form. So lastly, we have the Marauders map, right? Which shows Peter's name. Now, none of the pets show up on it as far as I can remember, but the map doesn't lie. And it knows Pettigrew is present. He was one of the original Marauders who created the map after all, right? But the moment when he shows up on the map is huge, and it plants the real truth directly into the text. Okay? So the last step I want you guys to think about, step 4, is to echo the twist thematically if possible. So a great twist doesn't just shock you. Remember, it resonates with the core of your story. So To Kill a Mockingbird does an amazing job of quietly planting the clues through the story that Boo Radley is not the monster that the town makes him out to be. Like, we find out that Boo Radley left gifts in the tree for the kids. He mended Jem's pants, right? These clues kind of serve as quiet nudges towards the hidden truth. Now, the kids don't know he did those things until later, but they're there, right? And the truth is that Boo is kind and gentle and even heroic. Because in the end, when Bob Ewell attacks Jem and Scout, Boo leaves his house for the first time in years to save them. And he stabs Ewell to protect the children. So was he dangerous there? He was to Bob. So these are emotional breadcrumbs too. They're not necessarily flashy, right? But To Kill a Mockingbird is about seeing past your prejudices. And the twist aligns with that theme. That's part of what makes it feel inevitable instead of random. And remember, that's one of the things that we want to do is we want to make these things feel inevitable. Like there's no other way the story could have ended. All right. Random out of the blue twists just don't have that same punch. But when it echoes the twist thematically, it really, really does. All right. So let's look at timing. So now that you kind of know what it is that you're supposed to be doing and how you're sort of leaving these breadcrumbs, like where do you put your reveal to create the maximum emotional impact, right? If the reveal is too early, it sort of fizzles. And if the reveal is too late, then the readers are going to feel really frustrated. So honestly, the true answer is that it varies from story to story. But you as the author have to sort of decide what feels like that sweet spot. All right. So here are some things to try, right? Try timing your reveal so that it happens right after the tension has peaked, but kind of before the story completely resolved. So in To Kill a Mockingbird, Boo Radley isn't revealed as the hero until really the final act, right? After Bob Ewell attacks the children, but all the emotional groundwork has been laid. So the timing allows the reveal to feel like a climax and not really a detour, right? If the story changes after the reveal, characters reevaluate things, consequences unfold, then your timing probably landed you in the right spot. So you want your readers to say, like, ooh, everything makes sense now, right? That's the sign of a well-timed twist. All right. Types of narrative bias. So let's talk about this for a second. I think this is really interesting too. So here are types of narrative bias that you can play with, right? One is the emotional bias. So the character can't see clearly because of fear or love or denial. I would say the Harry Potter book we've discussed falls somewhere here because like fear is driving that bias, right? All the characters are afraid. Same thing with Boo Radley. Characters are afraid of Sirius Black. They're afraid of Boo Radley. All right. We also have limited knowledge. So the character is missing a key piece of information, right? So we'll break this one down in a minute with Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. But we also have deliberate deception, right? The narrator knows the truth, but hides it. So like an unreliable narrator, anyone? Right? We'll kind of discuss this one with Fight Club. But naive perspective. So this one is often used in like middle grade or YA because the narrator misunderstands the world, right? Sort of like Scout who misinterprets adult behavior. So we've kind of hit on each of these in the workshop already, right? But let's use narrator as a tool. So like let's kind of break down these two and how the narrator is used as a tool for the plot twist, right? So they're another powerful tool for crafting these two-sided truths because they control your perspective, right? The readers only see the story through this one character's lens, the narrator, and they're going to end up inheriting the character's biases, their limitations, their blind spots, right? So like, let's look at the two different ways narrators are used to control perspective in these books. Right. So we have the unreliable narrator, that deliberate deception, right? This is a classic example of it because we experience his delusions as reality, right? And when the truth hits that Tyler, the main character, and the narrator are the same person, it sort of reboots the entire story. So when the twist happens, it's like roughly 3/4 of the way through the book, right? The narrator begins piecing together all these like strange inconsistencies and eventually confronts the truth. I am Tyler Durden, right? So this moment recontextualizes everything that came before it. So like, what were the clues that maybe this was an unreliable narrator situation? Well, one, there are memory lapses. Two, Tyler only appears when the narrator is asleep. No one interacts with Tyler and the narrator when they're together, right? And another character, Marla, calls him Tyler, which then the narrator just attributes to her unstable behavior, not his own, right? And lastly, their lives are sort of the exact opposite, all right? So Tyler Durden isn't real. He's just the narrator's split personality, and he was created as a reaction to his dissatisfaction with consumerist culture and his personal powerlessness, right? So the narrator presents everything as if Tyler's a real person, right? We experience his delusions as the reality until 3/4 of the way through the book, he pieces it together, right? So that's part of the timing and putting it all together so that it gets this like real gut punch. Because let's face it, like that's a huge twist. And then you realize for the rest of the book, he's mad. Whereas Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda, he's not unreliable because he's lying, right? He just doesn't have the full picture. So he lacks the knowledge. And because of that, he makes assumptions, right? So he also has an emotional bias. So Simon is really afraid of being outed, right? He's internalized his heteronormativity, right? He's constantly saying like, why is straight the default? And this fuels his belief that coming out is going to alter his relationships. And it blinds him to like his friends and his family's capacity for acceptance, which is the thing that he really, really wants. So if your twist involves a shift in character understanding, ask yourself, like, what does this character believe? And what are they ignoring or misinterpreting? Right? So here are some of the common pitfalls. You really got to be Goldilocks with this. If you're too obvious, then your reader is going to guess the twist like 50 pages too early and be totally bored. It doesn't feel clever, right? But if the twist comes with no setup, right? So for example, the villain ends up being someone we've never met, right? Then the big reveal relies on a detail that was totally hidden or completely left out. So they could have never guessed it to begin with. Also, you're going to want to avoid gimmicks. So like the dream sequence, the protagonist thinks she's in a real pickle and then wakes up and realizes it was all a dream, right? If you're relying on a cliche, maybe you should rethink your twist, right? Okay. How are we going to put this all together? Like, let's talk about the actual writing process for a minute. Okay. I'm going to give you a demo about how I baked the plot twist into my middle grade mystery that I'm currently working on. I do tend to lead more towards plotter on the plotting pantsing spectrum, right? So when I show you what I did, it's going to seem way more boring than it will for my readers to discover, right? Okay, but write or plan your plot twist first and then bake it into the outline or your writing plan, right? This kind of sounds obvious, but it's very true. The more you know from the beginning, the easier it's going to be for you to plant the clues, right? So I'm taking a leaf out of the mystery writer's handbook here. So I have a girlfriend who, when she was writing her first mystery in grad school, she was stuck in the middle. She was kind of pantsing the whole thing. She wasn't really sure how she was going to end it. And so she took it to one of the professors, and the professor said, well, like, who committed the crime? And she's like, I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. I started at the beginning. I haven't gotten to the end. And he's like, but the crime is the beginning. And that's when it dawned on her, oh, yeah, the crime happened before the story even started. So even if you're not necessarily planning on, totally outlining chapter and verse, your entire story before you get started, if you can have an idea of what your twist is first, it's going to be easier for you, even if you're pantsing, to lay clues down, right? So, but if you're a complete and total pantser, or you discover something along the way while you're writing, knowing ahead of time is good and well, but if you come up with it mid-draft, then revision is your friend. Reverse engineer it. Like, it may be as simple as then just going back and layering in clues, or it may mean you have to kill a darling or two to make it work. But like, who doesn't have to kill a darling or two in revision anyway, right? All right, so let me show you guys kind of how I did this from the get-go. So let me stop sharing this screen. Does anybody have any questions as I'm pulling up my Dabble project? Let's see, share screen, Dabble, share. Okay. I don't see any questions. So let me go ahead and show you guys. So this is a workbook that I made just for this presentation. And I shared this in the community if anybody wants to add that to their Dabble project, or even just like open it up and take a look at what I have in it, and you can answer it on paper and pencil, on your own. But I made a little workbook. And so in it, I just put your surface truth and your hidden truth, and a little space where you can go through and you can just sort of like play around with what you think your surface truth and what your hidden truth is. So for the story that I'm writing, The surface truth is the kids are going to be led to believe that Mr. Crowley, who is the school's most disliked teacher, Mr. Crowley, by the way, also believes this. Everyone in the story believes that Mr. Crowley sort of accidentally killed the janitor when he was at school way back in 1989, right? So that's kind of the surface truth that I'm leading the kids to believe in the story. But the hidden truth is the janitor's death was accidental. It was not caused by any action on the part of Mr. Crowley. And when the kids are able to sort of figure that out, what it does is it leaves him the ability to sort of unburden himself of the guilt, but it also reframes all of his actions in his son's eyes, right? So his son, Crow, will go from being angry with his father for very superficial social reasons to being surprised by his father's guilt, to then disbelief and a desire to clear his name, to relief and understanding. So when Crow reframes how he views his father, so will the reader. So then what I did was I went ahead and I made a spot to list out a handful of clues. I said 3 to 5 subtle hints that you can include to support the hidden truth. But you could do more and add more in here depending on, how complicated your twist is. After that, I have a spot where you can kind of look at your character's bias. Like, what do you want the characters and therefore the reader to assume as they're reading your story? And I know I want the characters to assume E.W. Landry was murdered. That's the big assumption. And I want them, since everyone thinks Mr. Crowley is the worst, so here's reputation, right? The kids are going to believe it when they uncover that, hey, maybe it was Mr. Crowley who killed E.W., the janitor. Reputation and gossip, because Mr. Crowley has a reputation of being the worst, that's a very easy assumption to play into. And reputation and gossip is wonderfully delightful to build into a school setting. Very easy to. Kids talk. So the reveal timing. For me, I decided that at the climax, which was sort of the 80-ish% mark, that's where I was going to build it in. Since this is a classic mystery, that's sort of the expectation. And this is the first mystery I've written, so I'm not going to try and buck the rules any. I'm going to work it in. And when I started to actually outline my story, it worked very well, sliding it in at that 80-ish% mark, right? So then here are my questions about the reader experience. Like, what assumption do you want the reader to make? That Mr. Crowley did it. What do you want them to feel when the twist hits? I want them to feel relief that it actually wasn't Crow's dad, Mr. Crowley. And what will they reinterpret once the truth is known? They're going to reinterpret all of his actions. They're not because he was a grumpy old man and super strict because he wanted to rule with an iron fist. He had good intentions, which were to spare others from living a life of regret and guilt as he had. So the thing that makes Mr. Crowley the worst is he has this phrase, safety first saves lives. And the kids think he's just being over the top with all his safety manuals and safety protocol and not letting anyone do experiments. But it was because of the experiment he did when he was their age that he thought led to someone's untimely death, that he's carried that guilt the entire time. And we want at the end to be able to reframe those actions for the kids so that they don't see him as being a strict teacher so much as just trying to keep them from making the same mistakes that he did. So what's your ideal twist reaction? I said the twist itself isn't going to be as satisfying as the reframing that Mr. Crowley does on his own and the reframing that Crow does when he looks at the intent behind his father's strict behavior. The understanding that unravels as a result will be cathartic rather than shocking because I wanted the end to be heartwarming, right? And it's going to align with my theme because this plot is a classic cozy mystery, but the subplot is about Crow blaming his unpopular father for the fact that he's a social pariah, right? And so this twist relates to the subplot and brings an understanding to the story. So now that I have all the information that I want to build in, right? How did I build that in? So you can see over here to the side, I've got all my chapters. I'm actually going to go ahead and close down my manuscript because the part I want you to look at is my plot grid. So when I click on my plot grid, let me show you, there's two books that I use when I outline a story. And so if you don't know what they are, Save the Cat Writes a Novel is one of them. I think most of you have probably heard of this one. But I also like to combine it with a blueprint for a book. And so this is the first outline I ever wrote was using this method. So I tend to bake it into everything, even though my own personal Abby Mathews method now kind of combines both of these. So how I did that was I opened up my plot grid, and you can see there's this right along the left-hand side, I have all the Save the Cat beats in there. So I have the opening image, I have the theme stated, I have the setup. Then down here, I have my inciting incident, and you can see I've filled in extra scenes and things along the way just so I can stair step myself to it. So just so that you guys know, since this is a middle grade book, each of these chapters has around 5 or 6 pages. So we're still pretty early in the book here when we get to the inciting incident, right? Which is where they find out what the mystery actually is. The ghost comes over the radio, it's the janitor, and they have this mystery he can't cross over until he figures out how he died. So debate, break into Act 2, the B story, fun and games. So all of that is right here under my scenes. The blueprint for a book piece is, it's kind of the inside outline is what they call the one technique in blueprint, but it's what happens and why does that matter to the characters? And all that's doing is it's baking in your emotional arc, right? Because what happens is of little consequence if it doesn't matter to the characters. So that's what I did. You can see if you click here, I put what happens on my note card. And then I put a little note that says why this matters to the story, why this matters to my characters. And then I just stair step myself. Because of that, this happens. Because of this, that happens. Because of this, that happens. So I walked my way through. So now that I've done the workbook and I know the clues that I want to plant, I made a third column here that says clues to plant. And I put what clue I wanted in each of these chapters. And you can see that I put a red ribbon for red herrings and a green ribbon for clues that are real. And so if you kind of come down here, like this one is great because I know I have a real clue that I'm going to quietly plant next to a red herring clue. So that's what I did. I kind of walked my way through, and for each of these red herring clues, I also sort of know if I find a way to take a real clue and quietly work it in next to it, then I'm going to be golden. That's how I'm going to hide them. So when I go to start writing, let me open up here. So chapter 2, and I go over and I click my notes. You can see as I was writing, I had all of my notes and the clues that I needed to plant in this chapter right here, right in front of me. So if I'm writing and I sort of forget what I'm doing, you click on this, your notes come up, right? Here's my radio facts. So these are the things about the radio that I know I need to work in, and I know it's a real clue. So I hope that seeing someone else's outline helps just a little when it comes to planning out your own plot twist, whether it's a mystery or not, like mine was. It's still the same strategy. So anyway, I am going to just hang out for a hot second and see if anybody has any questions that they want to put inside the chat. I'll be happy to answer your questions. And if not, like I mentioned earlier, I did put a link to the workbook in Dabble over in the DabbleU campus. So you can find that there. I will go back and also put a link to the workbook into the description of this video. So if it's something that you want to check out and adapt, based on whatever program that you might be using or your own outline style, you might just want to use it as just that, a workbook where you answer the questions and go from there. That is at your disposal. So it doesn't look like we have any questions. I don't know if that's because I fire hosed you guys with a bunch of information or if it's because I was just a really great teacher. I'm just going to say maybe I'm a great teacher. Oh, no, good. Okay, NJ's got one. So let's see. How do you convince the reader of the wrong side of the truth without pushing it and making it obvious? I think probably the easiest way to do that is to just have your main character believe it. If your main character believes it's true, and that's just like their normal way of thinking, then that's going to be a very easy lift for your readers to also believe that it's true. So, I mean, Boo Radley, I think, is really such a great example of this because it really does combine everything. The main character believes it. Her dad tells her it's true, right? Everybody in town tells her it's true. There's some reputation. As long as your main character believes it, I think that's all you really have to have in order for your reader to believe it as well. And you don't have to hit it over the head either. To your point, making it too obvious, as long as they state that that's what they think and then they move on, then that's all it takes. So let's see. What if the narrator has been intentionally lying to the other characters since the beginning? The reader only finds this out later. Is that too gimmicky or a cop-out in terms of a plot twist? No, I think then what you're dealing with is that unreliable narrator. And I am going to be honest. I have always wanted to write one, and I'm not sure if I have the chops to pull it off, but I think you're on the right track. So if your narrator is lying, ask yourself why the narrator is lying. And if you can give the narrator good reason to tell those lies, and then your reader discovers those reasons closer to the twist, it's all going to make sense why they did it. So I think that's how you're going to keep it from being a gimmick, is there has to be a concrete reason for that narrator to be lying in order to make it work, if that makes sense. All right, the best advice for plotting when it comes to romance with supernatural elements without trying to feel like you're repeating plot points that you've seen in other books. Oh, that's tricky because so I'm going to assume, and these are my assumptions, that if you are writing a romance with supernatural elements, okay, because I say this because I have outlined a rom-com that happens in space. So I had sci-fi elements in mind, but my plot was 100% your typical romance plot. So I hit all the beats. Okay, so like I think there's a plotting book called Romancing the Beat that specifically talks about plotting for romance books. So I hit every one of those romance beats. And then what I did was I made all of my world building sci-fi so that it was just this romance story that took place in space. So if your romance with supernatural elements is sort of similar, right? You're going to use all the same romance beats, but your twist could still come somewhere at the end. Maybe your female main character believes something about your male main character that has a surface truth, but there's a deeper meaning. Maybe that deeper meaning is he's a ghost. Maybe that deeper meaning is, I don't know, he's a zombie and he's really good at hiding it. Like whatever it is, when you reveal it, you can still reveal it at the climax of your story, because right in a romance plot, there's always something where the two characters come together and then something happens that's usually a misunderstanding that then pushes them apart, right before the misunderstanding is sort of cleared up, and then they're able to come back together. So you can still do all of that. It's maybe your twist is that misunderstanding that drives them apart in the first place. The twist is revealed when the misunderstanding is cleared up and they all come back together. So, and maybe you're just following those romance plots and weaving in supernatural elements and just making it kind of cool and sci-fi. That's actually what we're doing with our mystery book, is we're following a typical mystery structure and just layering in these sci-fi elements to it, which are not sci-fi, supernatural. So, all right, let's see. NJ says, I have a character that lives a double life, and we only see one side until everything falls apart. Then suddenly the soft character is a very hard one. How do I build it believably? Without knowing much more than just what you've put right here, I think if everything falls apart, if that scene totally makes sense as to why someone would go from being very soft to then being very jagged and angry or rough, it will make sense to your reader. As long as you can see that transformation take place and we understand why it's happening, your reader is going to believe it. I think where writers go astray is when most of the story stays in their head. And sometimes that's really hard for us because it all makes sense on paper to us, right? Because we're filling in the gaps in our head. You have to make sure that enough of those clues are planted so that the readers understand why this transformation has taken place. And then they will go with you to the ends of the earth. It will be believable if you put it all there. So, you guys, these are really great questions. And I'm not seeing any more. That might be it. If I hit end to stream and then you think of one. Oh, wait, Emily has a question. Okay, good. I tried to stall just long enough. When writing a series, would you add a plot twist for each of the separate books, plus to reveal others during that series? I don't know that I understand the question totally. Are you saying, do you have to have a plot twist in each book and a plot twist that builds to the end of the series? And if that's your question, that is totally up to you and the story that you're telling. It might make sense that if you have a 3-book series, it might make sense if you have a 3-book series that you have a big twist that you build to, in which case you're probably going to have to know that from the start of book 1 so that you can plant all those clues along the way. And it would have to be, I'd imagine, a pretty big twist. And there's bound to be examples of that out there, Emily. I can't think of any right off the top of my head. But then if you want smaller twists to plant along the way, absolutely. Maybe each of those 3 twists, maybe the first twist and the second twist are the clues to the third twist. I don't know what you have in your head, but I think you can be creative and do it any way that you want. And I know you have a good coach you're working with right now too, so she'll be able to help you lay all that out. But awesome. Great questions, you guys. If you come up with anything else and I've already hit end stream, or if you catch the replay of this and you have a question that you want to talk about, go to the DabbleU campus. I'll put the link to that also in the description here so that if you're watching this in the end, you can come and visit us on the campus. And we will keep this conversation rolling because, like I said, I'm working on a book with a plot twist right now. So all of this is fresh in my mind. I'm happy to be able to share it with you guys. Thanks for joining us. It's been a long week. Happy Friday, everyone. And good luck planning all your plot twists. Bye.